1 week ago, President Biden said inflation was temporary. He went on to say that spending trillions more would, and I quote, reduce inflation, reduce inflation, reduce inflation. Madam Speaker, I think he's the only one who believes that.
First of all, the good news is the economy is picking up significantly. It's rational when you think about it. The cost of an automobile is kind of back to what it was before the pandemic. We compare what the prices were for the last year in the pandemic, and they are up. They're up because, in fact, there was not much call for.
The survey found that inflation topped the list of voters' concerns about the future of the U.S. economy at 31%, followed by the national debt
So, folks,
at 22%.
if you think about what you just heard,
between the unemployment
and you
rate
realize
and the
that
economic
ultimately the Republicans and the Democrats are getting ready to go into their standard operating procedure, which is to call fear about the debt, fear about deficits, and more importantly, fear about inflation. It's happening right here, right now. And most of our activists don't have a clue what they're talking about. They don't have the tools by which to even understand what's being talked about. To them, if a price of bread goes up, it's inflation. But what you've got is a situation where we have been in a pandemic with supply chains virtually shut down in many ways for over a year, well over a year. And you don't just get to go in there and fire them back up to 100 and have them immediately producing all the pent-up demand that we have in this country that has been sitting there for, I don't know, years and years and years. And now suddenly people who have been trapped in their house for a year, regardless of how you feel about the anti-maskers and the gang, they're out there spreading the disease, so to speak. And there they are demanding stuff. So we've got a huge supply chain issue, which naturally, because a scarcity of goods, not printing money, scarcity of goods has created this huge backup in the supply chains. That's number one. Number two is you have the Saudis, who have been playing games for some time now with the amount of oil in production, driving up the cost of gasoline, which is the other thing most people see. And what is the thing with gasoline that makes it more unique than other types of commodities, etc.? Petroleum products are in virtually everything. You cannot make plastics without gasoline, without petroleum products. You cannot make lubricants. Now, you can, but the point is that we rely on all these petroleum-based products in just about everything that we do, including industrial cleaners and paints, you name it. So with that in mind, if you know that we have a supply chain issue and we have a lack of production issue and we have a game where the Saudis are holding back production so that ultimately it makes all prices rise, you notice the first thing people go to is, well, they've been spending. All this spending is creating inflation. Spending does not create inflation. Giving people money without production causes inflation. That is a real legitimate concern, and one of the primary reasons why we are not advocating for a UBI, because it really is inflationary. And as you saw from the beginning of this video, which, by the way, came from The Hill, you realize ultimately that if everybody's fear, and literally the top two fears by a mile, are the national debt and inflation. Please tell me, raise your hand, your virtual hand. Let me know which one of your favorite alt media people that you constantly put up there is talking about this, and not talking about like, oh my God, inflation, but really, really discussing the issues with supply chains, really discussing the issues with the lack of production of petroleum products from Saudi Arabia right now, et cetera. Which one is actually talking about this? Because you saw every person, that whole line that was in the graph originally, every one of them was afraid of inflation. And what is the trope that Milton Friedman gave all of us to hang our hats on? Printing money creates inflation. Money growth creates inflation. All these things are lies. They're literal lies. It's like he lied when he wrote it. He knew he was lying when he wrote it. But it's there. It's a lie. So when we talk about the big programs that we wanted, from Medicare for All, which by the way is deflationary. Hey, Republicans. Hey, conservative Democrats. You want to bring down inflation because you really think it's about money? Well, let's go ahead and invest ourselves into Medicare for All, which is deflationary. It's not going to cause inflation. The Green New Deal is not going to cause inflation. A job guarantee will not cause inflation. The only thing that will cause inflation, really, in the sense that we're talking about, there's many reasons like corporate greed, raising prices, price gouging, things like that. But remember, inflation is not caused by money growth. Inflation is caused literally by a shortage of goods that are in demand. You have a demand for goods and services, they aren't there. They bid the price up because there's a scarcity, an artificial scarcity in most cases, and voila, you get what they call a relative price story, not a or relative value story. We're not talking about inflation, which is the rise in all prices. Okay. But with petroleum being short, you can certainly see how inflation may be caused, I should say, by a lack of production there, right? That is once again a supply chain issue. That is once again a real goods and services issue. It is not a money printing issue. Have you ever seen a business turn away customers because they had enough goods and services in the back warehouse, but they didn't really want to serve they didn't want to make that money, so they turned people away? No. If people have a demand for a certain product or service, and a business is able to provide that product or service, they're going to do it because that's how they make money. Okay. Doesn't have anything to do with printing money, but that's the narrative. And for all the good reasons to hate Joe Biden or dislike Joe Biden, he was very accurate. He said, hey, look, this spike, this inflationary spike right here is brought on. It's temporary, first of all, but it's brought on quite literally from everyone being shelved and not going out and not being able to do anything to suddenly wanting to do everything they did before the pandemic, and the production's just not there. This is such a simple story to tell, but it is bastardized, and you saw the right wing literally sitting there going, Biden said, and there's other videos out there. There's a really good video out there. If I could have found it, I'd have put it in here, but it really showed all the different people talking about inflation. It was just like bam, 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 rapid fire. All of them pouting and flailing about inflation. So I'm hoping that, here we go into a fall where people are going to be going back to school. even with the Delta variant. And suddenly people are going to get back to their lives. Whether it's the right call or not is another story. The question is going to be, do we have enough people at work? Do we have the factories pumping out the goods and services we need? Are the international supply chains re-established in such a way that the time to production, the time to market, has been brought down to such a point that the bidding war for these scarce goods and services is over? And these are questions that you have to ask yourself, because where's the automation, guys? There's so much automation, we don't have any work left, right? Right, right, right. Wrong. Bottom line is that we've got so much freaking work to do, but they're not paying people anything to do it. So if they're not paying the people more money to do it, even though they're trying to hire people at like McDonald's now for $15 an hour, which is just crazy, but yay team, right? But for the most part, wages have stayed flat still. So there's not an increase necessarily in buying power. So what do you think would make people believe that it's printing money that's randomly out of nowhere causing inflation? Why do you think that is there? Well, I can just guess. One of the big reasons is because none of our alt media talks about this at all. Number two, our regular media talks about it in the way that's meant to scare you. And sure enough, it works every time. Look at that. The number one issue, the national debt. The number two issue, inflation, or vice versa. This is the blocker that is going to prevent a Green New Deal. This is the blocker that's going to prevent any of the important programs, any of those important programs that you count on, that you think matter. All these bold policy prescriptions. I love my friends at Sputnik, but I don't hear them talking about this. Hopefully they'll invite me back on soon to talk about it. I don't hear my friends at any of the other places talking about this. And I'm perplexed as to why not. Because if it's the number one issue, and you understand that people genuinely believe that somehow or another, the money we spent to pull out of the depression that we were in, we were heading into depression, right? This giant man-made recession that we did for the pandemic. People genuinely believe that government spending to do this stuff is creating inflation. So those bozos that are gold standard types that are pushing this stuff at the top, they're literally trying to cripple the economy. They're literally trying to bring it to its knees. And there's political reasons for that too, because if Biden's allowed to spend on all these giant programs, even progressives would have to begrudgingly tip their hat to Biden, because that's the kind of thing that FDR did that really brought about that golden age. And for all FDR's faults, and there were many, this wasn't one of them. So what do you think would take? What do you think it would take to get this word out to people so that they understand that printing money, that Biden's bold proposals are not creating inflation? I mean, think about this. Logs, wood. There was no one working the mills. The housing market slowed to a crawl. People weren't out there looking for new houses at the time. And slowly but surely, with BlackRock and others buying up the other houses that are going, upside down and people going bankrupt and whatnot, buying up these houses. Do you think that might have something to do with the price and so forth going up in the housing industry? I should say so. And do you think with a sudden new demand for new houses, with a lumber shortage, do you think that might drive prices up as well? Why am I not talking about printing money causing this? Why is that? Why do you think I'm not talking about printing money here? Because it's irrelevant. what's relevant is these businesses who want your money, who want you to do business with them, haven't ramped up the machinery yet, haven't ramped up the supply chain yet. And therefore, we have a temporary burst of inflation. But we do not have anything like hyperinflation or anything like that. This is brought on 100% by a shortage of goods and services that we need in our everyday lives. And production hasn't kept up now that we're suddenly been released to the wild again. Production simply hasn't kept up. Are there other factors there? You're goddamn right there are. There's a lot of these businesses out there that are driving prices up because they recognize that right here, right now, they can snag more money out of people. So that's greed. That's not printing money. But I want you to think about something, though. I said it earlier. I'll say it final here. What would happen if we had this supply chain breakdown and we had a decrease in petroleum production without green energy ready? And let's say we had a housing boom without lumber being, produced. And we had a UBI. And all of a sudden, everybody had money, but there was no goods and services. Would that maybe drive the price up because people had pent up demand, but not enough goods and service? The real economy wasn't there to meet them? Yeah, it probably would. So as we go into this next phase and you begin to hear them talking about the debt ceiling and you hear them talking about this irresponsible spending, remember that spending came during a pandemic. Remember, most of us didn't see hardly any money from it at all. And many of us didn't. Many of us went bankrupt. Many of us went down the toilet. So when you hear this stuff, you need to be on your guard. You need to be able to let people know unequivocally that inflation is brought on by greed, by monopolies, by corruption, and by a lack of goods and services. It's not brought on by printing money or irresponsible spending. It's just not. And I'm hoping that enough people out there care enough about this subject that they chase after, literally chase after your favorite alt media people. Whenever I see these lists of people, who is your favorite news source? Who's your favorite alternative media? Who's this? I always see all these other names. I'm like, what do we chop liver? Whatever, it's cool. But damn it, at least demand that your favorite people cover the fucking news, right? I mean, seriously, wouldn't that make sense? That if you're going to say they're your favorite, that they actually cover the important shit? Because this is what's going to take us down, folks. It's not the printing of money. It's when they turn the spigot off. And then that money doesn't come to us anymore. And then people start getting laid off again. That is when it's going to really, really get real. And worse, then they're going to try and offer you these garbage jobs, these jobs that you would never do at half the pay, less than half the pay. You remember 2008, 2009? The moratorium for evictions? It's just a 2-month delay. But right on the heels of that, student debts, all that coming right back in. Student debt payments start in November. So you're going to have big, huge chunks of money flying out the door to pay for federal student debt, which the federal government could wipe out immediately. You're going to have the eviction crisis hit, and the moratoriums for foreclosures will end in that same time frame as well. And they're talking about cutting spending. They're talking about the inflationary concerns. These people are soulless. They're murderers. They're killers. And the people that don't cover this are giving them cover. They're literally helping the bad guys out. I hope you understand what I'm saying, because as activists in this progressive movement, you saw Nina Turner get her ass handed to her in Ohio because the establishment still has a freaking firm grip on the political process. So thinking we're going to vote our way out of this is kind of naive. But if you don't believe this is an important subject and you fancy all the folks that cover op-ed crap and you don't think this stuff is important, well, it's never going to create enough mass attention for us to rise up and stop it. I don't know how things get popular. I don't know how people latch onto something and say, yes, I'm going to do this. But if we don't take this seriously, I swear no one else will. The fear mongers are going to win. And they're going to win on a fucking lie. On a lie. They're going to win based on a lie. And there are good people out there who I know the truth that are still suckled into groups that aren't taught stuff. How do we get you, the public, motivated to teach each other, to each one teach one, to make this shit come to reality so that we stop the debt and deficit hawks, so we stop the inflation fear porn? How do we do that? How do we get people interested? I mean, there's alt media groups out there that literally won't even talk about this. They won't touch it. And you can DM them, you can give them all the information in the world. They won't touch it. Yet they'll still get 5,000 views, 10,000 views. Or they'll show some bullshit crypto interview. What do you think it'll take to make our movement stand up and actually do something about this? There is no Green New Deal, period. And as we're watching the wildfires out west freaking destroy entire villages, and we think climate change is a joke, let me tell you something. This inflation fear porn is going to block, it's going to cock block in the worst possible way government spending. If you remember, during the first financial crisis where Obama took over, he had the Obama stimulus plan. It was only $900 billion. It wasn't even $1 trillion. And there were all these shovel-ready projects, but there were also these grants that were being given out to companies that could prove that they could provide jobs in their local community. I actually worked on one of those grant programs out here in the coal mining region, the lower anthracite region of Pennsylvania. And we had $100 million grant request that had gone through each phase at a perfect score. And then the Tea Party rode in and absolutely put a halt to all the projects. And then for the next however long, they laughed and said, the Obama economy sucks. Now, Obama sucked bad. His stimulus sucked. It was terrible. It was nowhere near adequate. But here Biden is trying to push forward for an infrastructure bill. Whether you like infrastructures bills or not, whether you like Biden or not the point. It's a better move than not doing anything. Let me just say that. But it's going to be stopped. And it's going to be stopped based on inflation fears. And if our infrastructure in this country doesn't rise up and wise up, as we say over here, then that means that our current infrastructure, as inefficient and energy hungry as it is, will continue as it dilapidates further and falls apart. And that's going to create even more emissions into the environment. So the cost of doing nothing is insanely greater than the cost of doing something. But the cost of doing something which amounts to paper dollars or digits, electronic digits in a keyboard, doesn't really cost us anything because our nation creates that money at will when Congress passes a bill. But Congress won't pass a bill. Why? Number one, they're captured. Number two, they're on the tip. They're freaking raking bucks in from all these freaking lobbyists. But number three, we the people can't demand better because we won't embrace and understand modern monetary theory so that we could, in fact, do each of these incredibly important programs to bring this freaking country and the world, really, quite frankly, out of the brink of disaster. I sometimes wonder if we even really believe in climate change. You know, is it a fraud? I don't think so. I mean, I bought in hook, line, and sinker. But to see the way these people are slow playing it and acting like inflation is a greater concern than burning up entire villages or climate refugees or non-potable water, you name it. I mean, look what Jordan's doing in Flint, Michigan right now. I mean, they still don't have clean water there. If all these things are happening right before your eyes, if polar ice caps are melting right in front of your face, and we're still talking about the greatest fear is inflation, we're lost. We've slipped the plot big time, haven't we? I mean, we are talking about the end of civilization as we know it today, and they're worried about inflation. They're worried about inflation. Who's going to rise up and take care of this? Certainly isn't going to be the Democratic Party. It's definitely not going to be the Republican Party. And if you leave it up to the alternative media community, nobody will even know about this. They won't even talk about it. What do we do, folks? I can only bleat into this friggin' microphone so much. I can only tweet to a crowd of tens, whereas people who do clickbait can tweet to thousands. This is serious. They're more afraid of inflation than they are of cataclysmic climate disaster. You just can't fucking make it up. So keep an eye on the news. I'm dead serious about this. You guys need to be in your favorite alternative media group's ear, in their tweet threads, yelling at them, fucking cover this motherfucking inflation issue and do it the correct way, not some bullshit way, but the correct way, where you understand that printing fucking money doesn't create fucking inflation. Because that's what they're hanging their hats on, folks. They're hanging their hats that you're too stupid, that you don't understand. And they're betting on it. They're guaranteeing that you won't understand. So they will continue this charade until someone puts a stop to it. I'd like to believe the squad would step up. I've seen moments where AOC took on Powell. I've seen moments where Rashida Tlaib has taken this on. I've seen moments John Yarmouth took it on. He knows. But where are they now? Why aren't they overtly screaming about this every minute of every day? Because this is the stuff that's going to hold back everything else you ever cared about. I want you to think about this because I'm at a loss. I'm at a loss. I don't know what it's going to take to make people think that this is more than just some silly accounting thingy. The United States government creates money to spend on climate change remediation. It creates money to spend on healthcare. It creates money to spend on the military. We don't even have to cut that. We should, but we don't even have to cut that to afford to do these other things. We may need to repurpose the real resources in the military over to fighting this purpose. But we create dollars like coupons out of freaking Chuck E. Cheese. Anything that makes you believe somehow or another that the federal government needs your money to function is a fool. The reason they tax you is because they need you and I to need that dollar so that they can provision themselves. But they don't need it for any revenue. Those dollars are literally functionally deleted, destroyed. So it isn't an issue of affordability, and it isn't an issue of printing money, creating inflation that's stopping this stuff. It's that the bad guys, and they are many, want to retain their power, want to retain a disciplined labor force. By disciplined, I mean making life so miserable that you will take any shit job that comes across the counter. And then there will be that jack off conservative pointing at you saying, why don't you take that job scrubbing toilet work? Just you lazy bum. Okay. The evil that is inside their hearts is so steep and severe that they will go hand in hand with the bad guys that want to stop us from being able to survive. And that, my friends, I call murder. You can call it another name all you want. But at the end of the day, when people die, that's fucking killing someone. By proxy, by policy, whatever you want to call it, by austerity. Austerity is fucking murder. So I think you all who have shown up for this should understand that 42 people are watching this right now. 42. That's it. Thank you, but that's nothing. These garbage shows that talk about shitcoin and stuff like that, they have like 5,000 viewers. 5,000 viewers listening to them laughing about shitcoin and Dogecoin and stuff like that. It's absolutely devastating. Devastating that our issue goes to the bullshit of neoliberal UBI. It goes over there to the neoliberal freaking free marketeer private currency shit. This Ponzi scheme of crypto. All the while ignoring that the federal government has the power to do incredibly amazing things and not have to raise taxes to do it. So I want you to think about it, because we don't have a champion right now, folks. The MMT community, as much as I've been a strong supporter of it for many, many years, isn't big enough. Yes, they are in the catbird seat. They are talking to politicians. Yes, they are in their ear. But when you see Jane and Joe Public saying their number one issue is fear of the national debt and fear of inflation, and you're afraid, you're worthless and a piece of shit for not talking about MMT to explain this so we could solve this problem. Worthless. Fucking outrageously worthless. Useless to society. Complicit in murder. When you see that, you understand. At least I hope you understand that the only way out of this rat trap is to fight, is to go out there with abandon and talk. These politicians, they've got to get elected. And they've got to get elected by bozos that are afraid of the national debt and fucking inflation. So what do you think they're going to do? Do you think they're going to suddenly strap their knee over their leg and sit there and break out a book and drop their glasses to the tip of their nose and talk about, well, let us tell you about the operational reality of reserve accounting. Let us talk to you about modern monetary theory. No, they're not going to do it. They want to get elected. And these people aren't listening. And sadly, neither is the alternative media community, and neither is the activist community. So when the next shit hits the fan, let that mirror bite you in the ass and stare back at you as hard as it can. And ask yourself, were you busy spreading clickbait? Were you busy throwing around stuff about alternative media wars? Were you doing it? Were you tweeting shit tweets? Were you using your activism, your online activism, to spread trash? Or say, damn exit, the only thing good about all these other tropey bullshit tweets. If you're doing that, you're part of the problem. You are part of the problem. But the good news is there's a cure. Stop fucking doing it. That's the cure. Stop doing it. Start making boycotts of groups that are unwilling to talk about this stuff. Go into their threads and demand they talk about it. I hope I made a somewhat compelling case. I'm at my wit's end with trying to figure out how to crack the algorithms on YouTube, how to crack them on Facebook, how to get people to freaking share shit on Twitter. I'm out of ideas. I beg, I plead, I share shit to the fucking inboxes. I don't know. I don't know what the problem is. I beg people, please retweet this. Please help us get this word out. If it's not a freaking stupid, down with the duopoly, it doesn't get shared. Anything that requires your brain doesn't get shared. The cancer of this movement is that we think we've got this big, huge majority that we can just, damn it, you guys, why didn't you stand up to the Democratic Party, you sons of bitches, you sellouts, you frauds? The reality is, the dipshits calling them fraud squad and all that stuff are out there talking about Bitcoin instead of this. Why? Because they're frauds. They're fucking frauds. I mean, maybe they all are frauds. It doesn't matter. I don't give a shit. What I care about is that we get this information out to people. Because without it, we're done. 43 people watching compared to 5,000 listen to some bullshit about shitcoin. We're fucked. That's all I can say. There ain't nobody else talking about it. Anyway, I hope you guys think about what I'm saying, because I don't know how to make it. I don't know how to make it so that we are proactive about this. I don't know how to get people to do it. I've spent 15 years of my life and the last 7 here at RP trying to explain this stuff. You would think that people would kind of care. You'd think that they'd take some action. I still hear Kyle Kalinske talking about your hard-earned tax dollar. What the fuck? I'm telling you, folks, this inflation thing, while it's a fake bullshit thing, has got everybody by the short hairs. They're clutching their pearls. And it's up to us to provide an answer for the hope that lies within. Anyway, with that, I'm Steve Grumbine with Real Progress in Action. I'm begging you guys, help us out. Help a brother out. Help a brother out, okay? Get this shit out there, okay? Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we'll be releasing a new Macro and Cheese podcast. It'll be myself, Patrick Lovell, and Eric Vaughn that we do the series, The New Untouchables. Please download the new Macro and Cheese podcast tomorrow, available on all your favorite podcast platforms. And then Sunday, we'll have an all-day marathon for the New Untouchables season number 2. Please catch up on both. Anyway, in the meantime, I'm Steve Grumbine. I'm out of here.